Checking levels, checking levels, checking levels, checking levels. Good morning, Kutztown University. Good morning, Kutztown University. I think that's okay. I think that's okay. I think that might be okay now. Good morning, Kutztown University. This is Cinema Cid, the Kriterion Kid, host of Cinema Cid, the Kriterion Kid, on the radio voice of Kutztown University, KUR. Cinema Cid, the Kriterion Kid is the show where I take Criterion spine numbers and put them into a random number generator and then generate the numbers at random to talk about a movie at random. And for those of you who are unaware of what the Criterion Collection is, the Criterion Collection is a film distribution company that is dedicated to gathering the greatest films from around the world and publishing them in editions of the highest technical quality, with supplemental features that enhance the appreciation of the art of film. I feel like this is the first week in a few weeks where I'm in a great mood. I'm very pumped. We didn't have any interruptions at all last week. There is still the odd situation of the PlayStation 5 that I may or may not own. For those of you who are unaware, I have a second personality. I guess it's becoming a little bit more easier to cope with now that I can confidently talk about it now. But this second personality is obsessed with video games like a child. Video games are for children, and he doesn't enjoy films. He mentioned one time that he had a PlayStation 5, and that connected some dots in my head. A few months ago, specifically September 23rd, 2021, $900 was withdrawn from my bank account. $900 cash. I went to the bank to check up on this because obviously this is very fraudulent activity, and they did not do anything about it because the facial recognition camera at the ATM that I guess I went to saw me draw $900 worth of money out of my account. So they thought that I was trying to scam them out of $900. That didn't make me look very good. But now I am out $900 and I may or may not have a PlayStation 5. That is a story for a later time. I made a post on my Instagram account for the show at CinemaCid, the Criterion Kid, spelled with a K for alliteration's sake because K is the first letter in the word kid, kind of giving a little update on this situation. I found a copy of the Final Fantasy VII Remake on PlayStation 5 in my copy of 2001: A Space Odyssey. And that was, in all fairness, a very good hiding place, because I just wanted to check and make sure that the film was still as bad as I remembered, which, by the way, it is. Do not watch 2001: A Space Odyssey. And like I said, this was a very good hiding place because I wasn't even sure that I would ever watch this film again. But yeah, so I found that disc, which kind of gives me even more of an affirmation that there is a PlayStation 5 somewhere in my vicinity. I just have no idea where, but the second I find it, I will destroy it. I mean, I could adopt it so I can finally have incentive to start purchasing 4K Criterion discs, but as I stated in my Instagram video, I do not have a 4K TV, and I could sell it so I can continue to buy Criterions in the future during the July and November Barnes & Noble Criterion 50% off sales, but seeing a PlayStation 5 in person would be like poison to me. I would get so enraged that I don't think I would be able to stop myself from destroying it. And not if, but when it does come down to that, I just hope that my second personality doesn't have the willpower to take control in that moment. I need to see him suffer. And I guess the way to do that would be to look into the mirror or something after I destroy the PS5, but I'm not going to think about the logistics of that right now. Now, all of that information aside, here's to a good show. I guess we will kick off the random spine selection and hope that we can get one within the next 3 or so minutes before we have to break off for a, break. So let's get to spinning. First number up is, I think... Alright, well, hold on, let me change the RNG real quick. I accidentally changed the minimum to 0 and the maximum of 1, so I just drew a 1. And I actually talked about spine number 1 a couple weeks ago, which is La Grande Illusion, directed by Jean Renoir. So sorry about that. Spine 627 is The Game, directed by David Fincher. Okay. I guess after this break, we will talk about The Game, directed by David Fincher. We are off to a great start. This is incredible. Hello and welcome back to Cinema Cid the Kriterion Kid, the show where I, Cinema Cid the Kriterion Kid, take Criterion spine numbers and throw them into a random number generator and then review the films that are selected at random. The film that I have selected at random before I read from the Kutztown notebook just now was David Fincher's The Game. So that is the film that I am about to talk about. The Game is David Fincher's third feature-length film following the fantastic Alien 3 and the lesser fantastic but still fantastic 7. Starring Michael Douglas, David Fincher takes his script written by John Brancato and Michael Ferris, which is an incredibly Hitchcockian romp, full of chilling suspense and unpredictable twists and turns, and really hones in on his directorial style. The film is shot very pristinely, very sterile, very clean, but there is still fluid camera movement when need be, and in very creative spots as well, like whenever it emulates spy cameras watching Michael Douglas's character. I guess for context, I should probably tell you what the movie is about. So Michael Douglas's brother, played by the one and only Sean Penn, is like, hey, here's a birthday present, and it's a gift card to some customer recreation services company. That's just what the name of the company is, Customer or Consumer Recreation Services. And he goes to this office and signs up for what is known as The Game. And The Game is specifically tailored to the individual who signs up for it because they are given an exam and various psychological and physiological tests. It's not clear as to when the game truly begins, but the game has indeed begun. The very first indication of this is whenever Michael Douglas finds a clown in his driveway that is posed as his dad was when he jumped off a building and killed himself while Michael Douglas was a child. In the mouth of the clown, Michael Douglas finds a CRS key, and this is when the news anchor of the news that Michael Douglas is watching starts speaking to Michael Douglas directly, saying that he can see him. And then Michael Douglas is like, how can you see me? And then the news anchor is like, how else could we have gotten a camera into your house? And then Michael Douglas finds a camera in the eye of the clown. The idea of the spy camera is later revisited whenever Michael Douglas visits a woman who is also a main character in this movie at her apartment, which is actually a fake apartment. All the books are cutouts, all of the pictures are from magazines, and all of the smoke detectors are cameras. So yeah, Michael Douglas goes on this adventure, and I guess everybody in his life has been replaced by actors because everybody is in on it and lying to him for the whole 2 hour and 8 minute long runtime. All of the wacky events that transpire in the film are pre-composed, and the film culminates whenever Michael Douglas, believing he had been in danger the whole time, considering the amount of times he has been shot at throughout the film, with presumably blanks and or rubber bullets, gets a real gun and then starts pointing it at people. And then the people start to freak out because Michael Douglas is pointing a real gun at them. And then in a shocking plot twist, spoiler alert for David Fincher's The Game, Sean Penn, Michael Douglas's brother, comes out and it's like, happy birthday. And then Michael Douglas shoots Sean Penn with a real actual bullet, and then Sean Penn dies. And then Michael Douglas, in a fit of sadness, jumps off the skyscraper in which this event transpired, just like the death of his father. However, at the bottom of the building, there is a big air pad for Michael Douglas to safely land on, and then Sean Penn comes back downstairs on the bottom of the skyscraper, and he's like, hey, I'm alive. It turns out CRS took your gun while you weren't looking and replaced it with fake bullets and then put blood packets in me, so I'm actually alive and I'm not dead. And Michael Douglas is like, oh, thank you, I love you, brother. And then Sean Penn was like, you're welcome. The reason I gave you this present is because you were kind of being an and I had to make sure that I had to give you a life message. Stop being an the people. And then Michael Douglas is like, message received, and then the movie ends. And that's David Fincher's The Game. The Game is a great flick, a great Hitchcockian romp. I don't know why it is on the Criterion Collection. I was looking at the special features to see interviews. Maybe this film was a cultural sensation. It was just a bunch of behind-the-scenes stuff and like trailers and the alternate ending, which I'm glad remained an alternate ending because it actually kind of sucked. There wasn't really anything to signify the cultural significance of David Fincher's The Game, and there was nothing really in the essay either, because the essay was essentially a well-written plot synopsis by an essayist who had nothing else to say about it other than the plot synopsis. So I guess my only assumption is that this film did not have a good physical release, and Criterion was like, alright, well, it's time to at least give this thing a good physical release since this is a good film. That's pretty much all I can say about it, because it seems that is all there is to say about it. Michael Douglas's The Game, directed by David Fincher, starring Michael Douglas. Pretty good. Watch The Game, directed by David Fincher, starring Michael Douglas. I guess before I start running Criterions through the RNG again, it should be noted that The Game is one of 2 David Fincher films on the Criterion Collection, the other of which is The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, which is also fairly lackluster in supplements, as well as fairly lackluster in its cultural significance. So I don't know why Criterion keeps skimping out on David Fincher, but they need to give him something proper because he deserves it. Criterion, I hope you're listening. Whenever you do the 4K UHD releases of The Curious Case of Benjamin Button and The Game, both directed by David Fincher, make sure you give them the treatments that they deserve, and not this schlock. Sincerely, Cinema Cid, the Criterion Kid. Now I am going to promptly continue with the Criterion random spine selection. But if I don't find anything before break, which will be in about 5 minutes, I think I might kind of abandon this for this week, because we do have stuff planned. First spine up is spine 741, which is My Winnipeg, directed by Guy Maddin, and I have not seen My Winnipeg, directed by Guy Maddin. So the next spine up is spine 682, which is Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicion, directed by Elio Petri, and he kinda looks like Chris Penn, who is in True Romance and Reservoir Dogs, films both of which are written by Quentin Tarantino, where he falls victim to a Mexican standoff. Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicion is a movie that I have not seen. Spine 877 is Limite, directed by Mario Ex Otto. That I haven't seen that. Spine 184 is Haxon, Witchcraft Through the Ages, directed by Benjamin Christensen. I have seen Haxon. There's an umlaut above the first A in is it Hoxen? Hoxen, Witchcraft Through the Ages. I think that's how you pronounce that, and I have seen that, so let's talk about it. After these breaks, I will talk about Hoxan, Witchcraft Through the Ages, directed by Benjamin Christensen. Stay tuned for that. I will be back very soon. Welcome back to Cinema Cid, the Criterion Kid, on the radio voice of Kutztown University, KUR. This is the show where I throw Criterion spine numbers into a random number generator and review the titles at random. The film I am talking about right now is Hoxan, Witchcraft Through the Ages, directed by Benjamin Christensen, a silent film era documentary from 1922. Hoxan is a very interesting documentary as it is expository in the information it gives while also suggesting theories regarding witchcraft and how people who acted peculiarly back then, who were then believed to be witches, were actually dealing with hysteria. I personally subscribe to the notion that documentaries are not films because documentaries are not narrative. However, while Hoxan is an expository documentary, it does offer very neat dramatizations also, with very chilling costume work and makeup work. The film dives deep into the witch rituals performed in the days of witchcraft, as well as the torture devices used on the people who were accused of being a witch. Both of these are very provocative, as the rituals depicted a lot of nudity and went into detail about the lore of Satan preying upon the women who were witches in air quotes, but as Benjamin Christensen suggests, were merely facing hysteria, which in itself is also an outdated view, but that is besides the point. It is also provocative in a very violent sense, because Christensen elaborates on the torture devices, gives actual pictures and diagrams of the torture devices, and explicitly says in detail how the machines operate and what they would do to the human body. As I've stated before, the expository portions of this film are interspersed with the dramatized portions of this film, and the dramatized portions of this film actually tell a progressing story. To give an example of what Christensen is reporting upon, Hoxan is a very notable film and has earned its place on the Criterion Collection because it is one of the first documentaries to combine essayist exposition and a dramatized story. However, it is also a very, very early example of horror in cinema. The only other two examples that are widely regarded as the godfathers of horror are The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari and Nosferatu, making Hoxan truly a one-of-a-kind. Hoxan, Witchcraft Through the Ages, directed by Benjamin Christensen. Pretty good. Watch Hoxan, Witchcraft Through the Ages, directed by Benjamin Christensen. Oh, it's pronounced Hexen. Watch Hexen, Witchcraft Through the Ages, directed by Benjamin Christensen, and pretend I was saying Hexen this whole time. That is it for this week's Criterion Random Spine Number selection, because right now I am going to begin talking about the film that I selected to talk about for Black History Month. Melvin Van Peebles is the godfather of black cinema, and Sweetback's Bad Heine song is the catalyst for this title and the catalyst for blaxploitation films. I don't know if I'm allowed to say the title of the film on air because it has the A word in it. So I guess every instance of the A word whenever I refer to the title of the film will be replaced with Heine. But it's also spelled with 5 S's in the title of the movie, so I don't know if like I would be off the hook if I pronounced it like a snake at the end, but I don't know if I'm going to take my chances. So, as I said, Melvin Van Peebles' Sweetback's Bad Heine song is the 1971 film that kicked off the blaxploitation genre. The film was completely self-funded because studios would not fund it at all, and honestly, I think that's a great thing, because the self-funding of Melvin Van Peebles proved that not only a black person can do exactly what Hollywood does without the help of Hollywood, but B, they can make a killing off of it. The budget for this film was $150,000, and the box office was $15.2 million. That is a massive kickback. So yes, Sweetback's Bad Heine song is a monstrous feat in not only black history and not only black cinema, but just cinema in general. As for the content of the film, it's It's something, alright. Sweetbacks is very trippy. And honestly, I think that's very indicative of the time period. This was around the time where all the hippies were doing their things with all of the sedatives, and all the Charles Manson types were doing their thing with all the other things that they do. Sweetbacks is definitely some sort of trip. It's incredibly creative, and actually another thing to point out in how important it is to cinematic history is that the quick cuts and a lot of the effects that are being done, all of the very off-the-hinge montages, have never really been done up to this point. So Sweetbacks is not only a pioneer in the blaxploitation genre, but also a pioneer in many editing techniques. I would say that this is probably one of the most stylistically engaging films I've ever seen. A lot of effects are being done with the celluloid to mess with the colors and the negatives to make the images look very uncanny and disturbing at points, all the while still including all of the tropes that people love from low-budget 70s movies. Sweetback's Bad Heiny song is painfully 70s in the best way possible. Multiple times you see the same explosion happening from different angles. You have funky music, which, side note by the way, was also composed by Melvin Van Peebles. You have the big costumes, you have the constant eater, the whole shebang. The film is an endless cycle of having eater, injuring/murdering police, and montages of running, and it's amazing. One of my favorite parts of the film is during the various montages of running is the constant mantra of come on feet, come on legs, come on run, do your thing, and it just keeps repeating for much longer than any reasonable amount of time, and I love it. Another thing to mention is the sound design. There's a lot of very awkward placement and very awkward Foley work in the film, but I can't help think that it's deliberate. But even if it's not, I think it adds to the charm of it. The fast-paced editing, which I've already established was very forward-thinking for its time, along with the, I guess, campy sound effects, it just gives a whole sense of charm to the film. It has a lot of heart. However, some of the actual cinematography is horrendously underexposed. There's a lot of things you can't see because there is not enough light being pumped into the lenses. Some of the scenes are actually almost pitch black, so I guess that's probably my only real complaint with the film. Just the fact that the cameras didn't seem to be used properly. But as for all of the other things, including the content that not everybody can get behind, refer back to my endless cycle of cop killing and eater. I think Sweetback's Bad Heiny song is an excellent time capsule for the 1970s and an excellent propeller of black filmmakers. The film is very anarchic, to say the least. It's very reminiscent of the French New Wave, maybe specifically Godard's very unkempt version of French New Wave, as well as including a lot of noir flavors and Pynchon-esque narratives. But it is also very angry. It's very rebellious. It's a call to action. In a landslide revolutionary monster of a film, Melvin Van Peebles proved that black people can make films as well, and just as well, without the help of anybody else. Sweetback's Bad Heiny song, directed by Melvin Van Peebles, is pretty good. Watch Sweetback's Bad Heiny song, directed by Melvin Van Peebles. But whenever you do watch it, keep in mind that it is actually not the word Heiny, it is the A word that I am unsure whether or not I am allowed to say on the radio. And that the word bad A word is spelled with 2 letter A's in the word bad and 5 letter S's in the word A word. But watch it, it's pretty good. And also, I apologize for mentioning Pynchon. Reading is bad. I'm still of this firm opinion, and if you disagree with this firm opinion of mine, you are wrong. Now on the list of things to do is talk about the film that I selected for the 2022 Criterion Collection Challenge. The 2022 Criterion Collection Challenge is a challenge made by a Letterboxd user, Ben, who says that every week you should watch a movie that you've never seen on the Criterion Collection, and every week will be given a different theme. So for these first couple of weeks that I've been doing this, it's been a movie from the 20s, a movie from the 30s, a movie from the 40s, a movie from the 50s, a movie from the 60s, and this week is a movie from the 70s. The film that I selected to talk about is Akira Kurosawa's Dodes'ka-den from 1970. Wikipedia says the release date is June 9th, 1971, but the movie came out in 1970, so I don't know what that's all about. Anyway, I selected this film because Akira Kurosawa is one of my favorite directors of all time, and this was a Kurosawa film that I have not yet seen. So I figured this is a better time than any to watch Dodes'ka-den, directed by Akira Kurosawa. Dodes'ka-den is a feature-length film directed by one of my favorite directors of all time, Akira Kurosawa. And it is notable because it is actually his first film in color. Unless you count 1963's High and Low, but at that point you're just arguing semantics. Even though he has been making movies since the 1940s, and this film came out in 1970, and he was establishing all of his director trademarks at that point, once color was introduced into his film, that became yet another trademark because of the way that he would make everything look very surreal and dreamlike. The way that Kurosawa implemented color into his films was very unique to him. Kurosawa was very conscious of the fact that he was now using color for Dodes'ka-den, and it definitely shows, because the film seems to wholly be taking advantage of it, with its colorful lighting, its beautiful painted backdrops, bright costumes, and lively set design, even though the set design is actual literal garbage. Like, that's not an exaggeration. Like, this movie takes place in a landfill. It seemed that color was destined to be a tool used by Kurosawa at some point in his career, because it had already been a tool that he used in his career. Kurosawa was also a painter, and techniques that he gathered from his art, while technically inferior because it's just still images and it's not the moving image that Kurosawa is known for, were very influential to how he used colors in his later films. This film was made after Kurosawa had trouble making a film in the United States, which never came to fruition because they kept pressuring Kurosawa, feeling that he worked too slow and that he was too inept to make a Hollywood film. And upon returning to Japan, the economy was very bad, and Kurosawa was not able to get the funding that he needed for the film. So Dodes'ka-den is on a production company with him and 3 other notable Japanese directors, and it was the hope that just the names attached to the Dodes'ka-den project would bring audiences to the theater. It did not. This film failed very badly. It was the only film under the Club of the Four Knights production company, which is the name of the production company that Kurosawa made with the 3 other notable Japanese directors. And afterwards, Kurosawa made an attempt on his life. Thank God he survived, though, because he continued to make masterpieces afterwards, and I will actually be talking about them at some point on this segment of the show. But that is not for today, because right now I am talking about Dodes'ka-den. Dodes'ka-den is a very episodic film. There's not really a big underlying plot, as it is just a series of happenstances with common themes. Structurally and I guess narratively, it's kind of very similar to Do the Right Thing, which we've talked about a few weeks ago. But rather than a main theme being racism, it's replaced with classism. The clash of the classes doesn't really rear its head until about 40 minutes into the film, because at one point a character goes into the city and there's a very stark scene change. As I've stated before, the majority of Dodes'ka-den takes place in a very disgusting landfill, but now we're in this kind of like very relatively clean city. And there is a very sure difference of the financial situations between the people in the city and the people in the landfill. Another common theme is that of the dysfunctional family, which it seems that Every collection of episodic vignettes depict dysfunctional families, such as unhappy married couples, a single father and his son, another single father and his 5 children that he adopted, and quite a bit more. All of these groups of people are connected through what you may be able to call the protagonist of this film, but not really, because he doesn't have a lot of screen time. It is a mentally disabled child who believes he is working as a trolley engineer, and he starts out his day by going to work, in air quotes, and work is an imaginary trolley station, and he is the engineer of the trolley. The title of the film is actually onomatopoeia for what a trolley sounds like on a track. Dodeskaten, 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 dodeskaten. And you get it. I want to go on to a little tangent before I continue with what I was saying, because the fact that dodeskaden is the sound effect of a trolley on a track automatically gives the audience watching the film the idea of rhythm, the idea of musicality. This film is a very musical film, and the episodic bits, I guess, could be indicative of different movements in a piece. The score is worth mentioning as one of the strongest parts of the film because it is very well composed, it's very jovial, and then it's very eerie and creepy when it needs to be. It conveys these 2 different types of emotions very fluidly, and I feel like that's an impressive achievement. Like I said, you can't really consider this kid a protagonist because there is no real lead actor in this film. The film is about the community, and it discusses poverty on a macro level. Throughout the film, he is visiting all of these characters in their low points. Contrary to them, though, the boy is very happy. When giving in-depth film analysis, it is important to note the difference between the theme and the message. As I've stated, the themes in this film are community, dysfunctional families. Actually, one I didn't even mention was both physical and mental illness, and classism. But the true message of Dodeskaden is to follow your dreams, man. There is a scene in the film where a man is talking to an elderly guru type, and he's depressed because he lost his entire family. His wife and children are just gone. And through this loneliness, he wants to end his life. So the guru gives him a poison, which actually is a digestive, not a poison, but that's for later. After taking the poison, the man says that he can only see his family in his dreams now, and that it's unbearable. And the guru asks him, if your family continues to come back in your dreams, then wouldn't killing yourself kill them as well? The man then panics, realizing that he made a mistake in taking the poison, and the guru begins looking for something to counteract the poison, which is before it's revealed that he took a digestive. I think this scene is very telling for what Kurosawa is trying to say with this film, that doubts are a poison, and that dreams are the antidote. Arguably, the only happy character in this film is the child who is operating his imaginary trolley. Everybody else is a depressed mess because they are not living under good circumstances. A lot of the characters dream for better things, but the doubts keeping them away from their dreams prevent them from pursuing them. And while there is this very humanistic message saying to follow your dreams, there's also a very bleak reality in the film, which is actually fairly uncharacteristic for Kurosawa, wherein some circumstances that one is given will prevent pursuing dreams, not just doubts. And that's not to say the boy operating his imaginary trolley is actually literally operating a trolley, but that illusion in his mind gives him the happiness that no other character in this film has. The message of the film is very ironic given Kurosawa's circumstances while making the film, and the circumstances leading up to making it, but I think it is a message that he, whether consciously or unconsciously, heeded, considering what was to come. Some of his greatest masterpieces coming out in the 80s, like Kagemusha or Ran, and then one of my personal favorite films to come out in 1990, Dreams. And it really does come full circle like that, huh? Dodeskaden, directed by Akira Kurosawa, pretty good. Watch Dodeskaden, directed by Akira Kurosawa. We are now coming up on a break, and I guess that is it for me talking about Criterion titles today. Because after break is the section that we have pretty much every single week at this point, and that's given that we don't get interrupted, but I'm feeling good about our chances today. I don't think we'll get interrupted today. So after the break is the segment where I talk about movies that I wish were in the Criterion Collection and make a case for them as to why I think they should be. So that is coming up. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome back to Cinema Cid, the Criterion Kid, on the radio voice of Kutztown University, KUR. This is the show where I throw Criterion spy numbers into a random number generator and then randomly generate a number to talk about that corresponds with a Criterion title. However, that is not the section of this show currently. This section of the show is the section where I talk about movies that I think are deserving of the Criterion treatment and that I think should be in the Criterion Collection. The first film I want to talk about is something that I thought of earlier when I was talking about David Fincher's The Game, starring Michael Douglas. I think that they should add David Fincher's Mank to the Criterion Collection because as it stands currently, being a Netflix original film, it is trapped on a streaming platform, waiting to break out and be purchased by cinephiles like me. And since Netflix now has a deal with Criterion and they've started putting out films on Criterion for the past couple of years now at this point, I think Mank would be a great title. And if Mank does come out on the Criterion Collection, I hope that they will make a David Fincher box set and put Mank alongside of The Curious Case of Benjamin Button and The Game to be a nice collector's item for David Fincher fans. And I hope in doing so that they not only give Mank the supplements that it deserves, well, not that it deserves, but like it doesn't even have, but I hope they up the ante on these supplements for The Curious Case of Benjamin Button and The Game as well, because the supplements for those Criterion releases are not good. And I also think now that Citizen Kane is out on the Criterion Collection and also a 4K UHD, that it could also sell as a separate box set with Citizen Kane. So I guess you can make two versions of Mank Criterion. You got the regular Blu-ray version. Just ditch the DVD completely. Nobody buys DVDs anymore. Nobody uses DVDs anymore. The only reason people buy Criterion DVDs is because they're $10 cheaper. So whenever you make the Mank Blu-ray, put it with the David Fincher Collector's box set with The Curious Case of Benjamin Button and The Game, both of which are also on Blu-ray, and make those supplements better. And put the 4K UHD version of Mank next to Citizen Kane. Put them in a box set, like an Orson Welles, David Fincher retrospective type of thing. I think they would sell like hotcakes, and everybody would love you for it. The next film that I wish was on the Criterion Collection is also something that I just thought of while I was talking about the other randomly selected film today. When I was talking about Hexen, Witchcraft Through the Ages, directed by Benjamin Christensen. And I guess this is actually two films that I wish were on the Criterion Collection. So obviously Hexen is already on the Criterion Collection, but I feel as though if the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari and Nosferatu the Vampire... No, wait, Nosferatu the Vampire is the Werner Herzog Nosferatu. I don't want the Werner Herzog Nosferatu on the Criterion Collection. I just want the original 1922 Nosferatu on the Criterion Collection. So I want that. I want the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, and then once you have those two out, you can take Hexen and put them all on their own box set. Early cinematic horror, or early examples of horror. I'm not the naming department, okay? I just think that it would be a very good idea for these three titles to be on the Criterion Collection together, in a box set together, to celebrate the early years of horror. Besides the obvious marketing advantage that you would have in releasing the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari and Nosferatu on the Criterion Collection, I think that each film also has aspects that make them notable in cinematic history, and I feel it would be a shame if they were not added to the Criterion Collection. Now, I'm running low on time, so I think I'm only going to talk about one more movie, but it seems that I'm actually going to be able to get to talk about it this time. So, a movie that I wish was on the Criterion Collection, probably the most out of any movie ever, is Joe Dante's Gremlins. Hey everybody, welcome to Gamer Corner. It's been a little while, hasn't it? This is your host, Jeff the Gamer, and you're listening to Gamer Corner, the subsidiary show of Cinema Cid the Kriterion Kid that has been endorsed by Cinema Cid the Kriterion Kid. Sorry I've been away for a little bit. I've been playing my PlayStation 5 recently. I don't really have a lot of time to play a lot of video games at the moment, but what I have been playing is a lot of the Death Stranding Director's Cut that is currently a PlayStation 5 exclusive, but will come out to PC within the next couple of months, which I personally don't know how I feel about, but if the game can reach more people, that's incredible. Because Hideo Kojima just keeps making these masterpieces, and they are landlocked by exclusivity. Which, yes, obviously makes me feel really cool for being such a PlayStation freak, but that means a lot of people don't get to experience his art. Anyway, I would say that the Death Stranding Director's Cut was definitely worth it just getting a PlayStation 5 for. I didn't think I was going to be able to nab a PlayStation 5, but I got it just in time for the Death Stranding Director's Cut to come out, and I have not been disappointed. I'm only really just getting into it now, though, because I was playing the Final Fantasy VII Remake for a little while. As for the differences, there are not many. I was really hoping for more story content, because that's what the trailer suggested, but there's not too much. It's just kind of a series of deliveries that kind of delves deeper into the lore a little bit, which I do enjoy, but I feel is a little bit unnecessary. The inclusion of the new structures to aid cargo delivery are really neat, though. You have the cargo catapult, which is very fun to use. You have the Cairo bridges, which are, you know, they're there. They don't work in the timefall at all, and they're really narrow, so you can fall off of them really easily, but they're convenient sometimes. And then last but not least, my personal favorite out of all of the new structures in the Death Stranding Director's Cut are the jump ramps. You can make Norman Reedus do tricks on his motorcycle. You can make him spin around on the motorcycle, and BB likes it a lot, and you get a lot of likes from BB. And he laughs and he claps his hands, and he's having a good old time. Another notable thing about the Death Stranding Director's Cut is the fragile circuit, which is basically like Mario Kart, but in Death Stranding. They add new vehicles, and there are a lot of tracks, and there's like leaderboards and stuff, and when you win the leaderboards, you get like a lot of materials for road building, which then becomes addicting. Death Stranding, it becomes like Minecraft. It becomes addicting like Minecraft. When you get a high enough score in the fragile circuit, you can actually unlock the vehicles to drive around on the roads, and they're actually the fastest vehicles in the game. They're faster than the motorcycles, and you can get across the entire planet in like 7 minutes. The Death Stranding Director's Cut was worth the wait for finally getting a PlayStation 5, but I just kind of wish that they announced that they are also going to put the Death Stranding Director's Cut on PC, because getting the PlayStation 5 after all that time was a hassle. Finding the person to buy a PlayStation 5 from, because I couldn't get into the PlayStation Sony queue, and then getting the money for the PlayStation 5 was a feat in its own. But I finally did it, and I finally got to play the Death Stranding Director's Cut. It looks like that's about all the time I have for today, but I'll see you guys next time. This was Jeff the Gamer, and you're listening to Gamer Corner, a subsidiary show of Cinema Cid the Kriterion Kid. Take care, everybody. Love ya.